Okay, so this lecture is about People of Paper by Salvador Plasencia. So this is what his website looks like if you go to salvadorplasencia.com. It just has one button that you click on and it brings you back to the home page over and over again, and it has this image of this suitcase. So he is an American writer. He was born in December of 1996 in Guadalajara, Mexico. His background information is he has a BA in English from Whittier College and an MFA in fiction from Syracuse. He is a recipient of many awards, all kinds of different awards. And he is an assistant professor of creative writing at Harvey Mudd College in California. So this is what his page looks like at his college. So it is actually a real college. You can really go be his student if you are interested in nonlinear fiction as your main ambition. And so it would be something to check out if you were really, really interested. So about the book. This is what it looks like. That's what the cover looks like. It's considered metafiction. This has been questioned, and we'll talk more about that later. The People of Paper is the debut novel of Salvador Plasencia. It was published as part of the Rectangulars line of McSweeney's books, and it was originally published in 2005. So he says that he ended up at McSweeney's because every publisher, big, small, independent university, turned it down. It's considered metafiction, and that's fiction in which the author self-consciously alludes to the artificiality or literariness of a work by parodying or departing from novelistic conventions, especially naturalism and traditional narrative techniques. I would call it a work that is self-aware that it is a book. So Plasencia is uncomfortable with the metafiction label. He says, you've got to sell this book. And so you say, it's a war novel, it's a memoir, it's about immigration, it's a metafiction, it's a love story. But if you read McSweeney's description, it's absurd. No major publisher would use that as a description. You're going to find a tag like, it's a father-daughter story. So these are the influences that he had. These were writers who had re-engineered the page for their own purposes. And I put links on all of their names so you can go explore those on your own if you really, really want to. So it's very unusual for a writer to reveal their childhood influences, and I thought this was really interesting, especially to us. He said he always gravitated to short series because he could own the whole story, like the Fantastic Four versus X-Men, and some strange retelling of King Midas in New York, I forget its name. On television, he liked Voltron, Inspector Gadget, Transfer Z, Gem, and the Holograms. When the big Whittier earthquake happened, I was sitting on the carpet watching Gem, he said. So, more TV. He was later on influenced by Saved by the Bell. Zach Morris stops in time and talks directly to the audience. That's the first time I understood metafiction. I didn't have a name for it, but I knew something was going on. There's also a ton of Spanish language shows and movies that he watched, and a lot of the Charlie Chaplin of the Spanish TV world and movie world. So Chaplin did call him the greatest comedian of our universe, or something like that. And Salvador Plasencia wonders, did Chaplin know Spanish? Because much of his work is puns and malapropisms, and I'm not sure how that would translate. But then again, there is violent slapstick to him as well. So video game wise, he ended up with the Sega Master System instead of Nintendo. So he missed out on what he thinks is a lot of great stuff. But he thinks often of the Mario Brothers universe. He influenced Shane Jones, the writer and the teacher, his book has been cited about 57 times in academic articles on subjects ranging from Latino studies to transnationalism to metafiction. He has a wide range of influence. So he has a certain point of view about how books and writing manifest. And so these next slides are about all of his point of view on writing in books. So he says the way we materially see the novel has a profound effect on the way we construct the narrative. If we understand the novel as a single column of prose spread over 500 pages, so one block of text per page, the stories and paragraphs we write are in a very real sense just conforming to this arbitrary guide. He thinks that the way we understand the book is only a domesticated version of the wild feral origins of the book. We have house cats when once we had saber-tooths. And I tend to think that narrative games are a way to reclaim that wild beginning. They said my book was gimmicky, he says, that it's a parlor trick, and the thing to me is that it works. Even looking back at those old books, even early manuscripts, they were these wild, crazy things with woodcuts and even pages on top of pages, and it was a very diverse way of looking at the book. And those were original books, the initial books. And there was this weird prudishness about the book, or towards the book. Like if you deviate from that, you're not being true to the book. But the book was always crazy. Only recently did the book become a single problem on a page. So that kind of always irks me. A parlor trick, right? But the book was always crazy. It's only been tamed recently. So the dominance of the standard formatted book makes it appear as if this is the organic, natural form of the novel. The assumption is that the way you compose a novel is by exclusive use of prose and design as a thing which is outside of writing. So somewhere along the evolutionary line of the novel, we opted for faster flips of the page over more varied typography. We opted for velocity. So he says, I'm interested in the reverse. Yes, someone is talking to me, I'm seduced. But I guess I'm interested in the reverse, and a writing that sticks to the page and brings the reader closer to the pulp that they are holding. Novels where the paper is the site of the novel, not just a container. So this is what his manuscript looked like for the people of paper. And you can see he's really experimenting with white space and where the words go and blocks of blackness. And he's really thinking about what that page should look like. So he used die cuts in his book, and this is where it came from. So Eli Horowitz was the managing editor at McSweeney's, picked up a chapter for the quarterly review, and 8 months later he asked me if I wanted them to do the book. Horowitz is tremendous, the best reader I've ever met. He was extremely lucky, or I was extremely lucky when I ended up with him, he said. He never touches your sentences. Instead, he points you towards the possibilities of the line and where you can take it. But the die cut was actually his idea. In the manuscript, there was some overlap between Baby Nostradamus, Little Merced, Ercerde, and the moment of erasure. The diecut seemed like the most reasonable solution. So this is what his book looked like in the editing process. You can see the notes from the editor all in red, and the relationship between the editor and the author taking form here. So in the book, he experiments with non-traditional languages. The Mechanical Tortoise has a passage written entirely in binary. So understandably, the tortoise binary flusters human compilers. It's a very mammal-centric view of the universe to expect mechanical amphibian language to conform to our computers. Baby Nostradamus uses silence as a language. I suppose that could remind you of John Cage. It's usually represented visually by a giant black rectangle. He says he wasn't satisfied with the baby Nostradamus signifying silence. As the novel progressed, I tried to turn the darkness from a limp muteness into an active form of resistance. He says, the way that I understand the page, and most people for that matter, white space is silence and any inscription equals sound. Yet when I see the black rectangle in Tristram Shandy, this is a book by Lawrence Stern, who is one of his influences, I read quiet sadness, death. And so I became really interested in this inversion, he says. So the story, you know all about the book, but what about the story? Federico is a devoted husband and father, but when his lime-loving wife, Mercedes, abandons him, he and his daughter, little Mercedes, who also loves limes, must start a new life together. They leave their home in Mexico and head for California. There they settle among a community of flower pickers, where Federico's sadness festers and his daughter develops a dangerous addiction to limes. All the while, an oppressive force bears down on the town. When the identity of this mysterious oppressor is finally revealed, the story takes on an unexpected turn and moves towards its magical, breathtaking end. So, this is a novel in which the people of El Monte, California wage a war against omniscient narration, while the author himself is busy getting dumped by his girlfriend. Add to this a host of characters, but not limited to a baby prophet who speaks in large black rectangles, a constantly dissolving woman made out of paper, and the true history of Rita Hayworth. And you get a novel that is by terms whimsical, despairing, and darkly optimistic. The first image that he had was a woman made of paper, and it was tied up with the actual material of the book. Literally, she's made out of paper. Metaphorically, she's made out of paper. And what do we do then with this woman that's made out of paper? How do you touch her? What does it feel like? How does she go shopping? It started out in the fairy tale vein, and then it began to flesh out into more real world implications, like what happens when you make love to her. She falls apart, you get cut. So the book is essentially a love letter to El Monte, his hometown. In the wider cultural imagination of Los Angeles, El Monte exists as a place where you go to buy your Toyotas, as a one-line allusion to Tarantino's Jackie Brown, as a helicopter footage of El Monte police officers kicking a surrendered and spread eagle EMF gangster in the head and then high-fiving. El Monte was also once Hollywood's barnyard. Mr. Ed was born there, and the MGM lion was housed in Gay's Lion Farm. The El Monte that ends up in my fiction obviously plays upon these myths and perceptions, but ultimately I try to represent a community that is struggling with very ordinary problems, trying to make sense of what it means to have faith and be in love. I couldn't be constrained into a small historical space, he said. I was really fearful of attempting an historical or reality set in 1988 or 1970. because in a way you're locked into that possibility. If you have a time, a kind of temporal place that's not tied to any real history, then you can jump around. You can go from Africa to the Americas, back to ancient Rome, anytime you want to. It becomes liberating. You can put Napoleon and Nixon and Kennedy on the same page. It was my own kind of weakness that I couldn't be constrained into a small historical space and get the same mileage. I needed to jump around, cross continents and times, and in that way, the mythological backgrounds helped me do that. In this kind of gathering, you find out that your progenitors were indeed wise, hardworking people, as you always imagined, but you also find that they never washed their dishes and stuffed their shoes with newspaper for an extra inch of height, and that neighbor you're going to hate one day, he courteously offers you a plate of cheese and fruit. I wanted a type of time travel where you never had to leave the neighborhood. So he says, if I said fairy tale, I don't think I meant it because I'm wary of these connotations that we often associate with these types of fables. The People of Paper does not want to be a parable or a story of magical happenings in a time no one was there to witness. I wanted to get rid of the temporal distance and bring everyone together into the same room, to simultaneously meet your great-great-grandfather and that annoying neighbor you will have 3 apartment moves from now.